Keanu walked into the busy airport, carrying a small backpack. He looked like an ordinary traveler wearing simple clothes, a cap pulled low over his head, and headphones around his neck. Few people recognized him as he moved quietly through the check-in line, smiling politely at the staff. He never demanded attention, never acted like a star. When he reached the counter, the airline worker scanned his ticket. Something unexpected happened. After checking the details, the worker smiled and said, "You've been upgraded to first class today. No extra charge." Keanu blinked, surprised. "Oh, thank you," he said softly. It was a kind gesture he hadn't expected. He accepted it with quiet gratitude and followed the signs toward the gate. At the gate, boarding began soon after. Keanu waited patiently for his group to be called, even though his new ticket allowed him to board earlier. He didn't rush or push past anyone. When his row was called, he stood up and moved gently through the crowd, holding his small backpack. Close. On the plane, a flight attendant checked his ticket and guided him toward his first-class seat. The seat was large, soft, and comfortable, much different from the smaller seats in economy. There was a blanket neatly folded, a glass of water waiting, and a warm smile from the cabin crew. Keanu placed his backpack carefully under the seat and sat down. As the plane filled with passengers, he leaned back and looked out the window, appreciating this small luxury. He thought about how rare it was for him to receive something without asking for it, and how it felt to just quietly enjoy the moment. A flight attendant came by again, offering a drink. "Would you like anything before takeoff, sir?" she asked kindly. Keanu smiled gently and asked for a cup of tea. He wasn't one for alcohol or fancy drinks, but he appreciated the offer. As he waited, he took out a book from his bag. Around him, other first-class passengers were settling in. Some seemed used to this comfort, barely looking up as they placed laptops on tables or ordered drinks with ease. Keanu, however, stayed quiet and humble, reading his book and sipping his tea. Plane's doors closed and the safety video began. The engine started, and soon the plane rolled onto the runway. As it lifted into the sky, Keanu felt grateful for this peaceful moment. But not everyone was at ease. In the back of the plane, a man in a suit was arguing with a flight attendant. His face was red, and he kept pointing toward the front of the plane, clearly upset. Keanu didn't notice at first. He was lost in his book, enjoying the quiet time away from cameras and attention. A few minutes later, the same flight attendant who had served him tea approached his seat. She knelt down slightly and spoke in a low voice. "Sir, I'm very sorry. There seems to have been a mistake," she said gently. "This seat was actually reserved for another passenger. We would need to ask you to return to your original seat in economy class." Keanu looked up slowly, confused at first. The upgrade had felt like a random act of kindness, but now it was being taken away. He could have argued or made a scene. He could have told them who he was. But that wasn't his way. He smiled politely and said, "Of course. No problem." Carefully he gathered his book, his cup of tea, and his small backpack. He stood up, nodded to the attendant, and walked quietly back to economy class. As he passed by other passengers, some recognized him. Whispers filled the rows. "Isn't that Keanu? Why is he moving back to economy?" But Keanu didn't seem upset. He simply found his seat in economy and sat down again. The seat was tighter, less comfortable, and there was no blanket or tea waiting for him. Still, he didn't complain. He placed his bag under the seat, opened his book again, and kept reading. Yet, a quiet tension had spread through the cabin. Many passengers had seen what happened. They noticed how calmly he had accepted the situation, without anger or entitlement. Even the crew seemed uncomfortable now. The mistake wasn't really about a seat. It was about how a person was treated first. Welcomed, then dismissed without much care. Keanu's kindness stood out, even in that small moment. He hadn't asked for the upgrade, and he didn't argue when it was taken back. He simply accepted it, treating everyone with respect. Little did the airline know that this small act would soon cause a ripple far beyond that single flight. For now, though, Keanu sat quietly, flipping pages in his book, unaware that others around him were watching and quietly admiring his grace. The flight continued quietly after Keanu returned to his economy seat. He sat peacefully reading his book, showing no signs of anger or frustration. But the passengers around him couldn't stop thinking about what they had just seen. Many whispered quietly, wondering why someone like Keanu had been removed from first class when he had accepted the upgrade so kindly. Across the aisle, an elderly man leaned toward Keanu. In a soft voice, he said, "I saw what they did. That wasn't right." Keanu gave a small smile and said, "It's okay. Sometimes mistakes happen." His calm reply made the elderly man pause. Most people would have been angry, but Keanu showed no trace of pride or arrogance. A few rose back. A mother with a young child kept looking toward Keanu. Her little daughter was curious too, and waved shyly at him. Keanu noticed and gently waved back, his smile warm and kind. That small gesture made the child laugh quietly, and soon others in the nearby seats began to relax. Sensing the kindness that seemed to follow him, the flight attendants continued their service, but their smiles felt forced now. Some of them avoided looking directly at Keanu. They probably felt awkward about how the situation had been handled. One young flight attendant seemed especially troubled. She passed by several times, glancing at Keanu as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Eventually, she paused and softly offered him a drink. "Would you like anything?" "I'm sorry for earlier," she whispered. Keanu thanked her politely and asked for water. His gentle response made her feel a little better, and she walked away with a small nod, clearly appreciating his patience. As the hours passed, a sense of quiet respect grew around Keanu. Though he was sitting in a cramped economy seat, many passengers noticed how he treated everyone kindly, without complaint. Even after being moved from first class. At one point, a man sitting beside Keanu struck up a conversation. "You know, most people would have made a scene about what happened," he said, shaking his head. Keanu looked thoughtful for a moment and replied, "There's no point in making things harder for the crew. Maybe they're having a tough day." 2. His words left an impression on the man. It reminded him that kindness isn't about getting your way, it's about understanding others, even when things don't go right. Soon, stories about what happened began spreading through the cabin. Passengers were talking about Keanu's patience, his respect for the staff, and how gracefully he had handled being moved. Some even started comparing him to other celebrities, saying how rare it was to see such humility in someone so famous. But not everyone was so impressed. The man in the suit, whose argument with the crew had caused Keanu's removal from first class, sat comfortably at the front of the plane. He didn't seem to care about what had happened. His headphones were in, and he was sipping his drink as if nothing had occurred. Meanwhile, back in economy class, a quiet kind of unity was forming. A young woman sitting near Keanu offered him a piece of chocolate. "Just a little something," she said with a smile. Keanu accepted it politely, thanking her sincerely. These simple human moments filled the rest of the flight. When the plane finally landed, passengers gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark. Many glanced toward Keanu, feeling grateful that they had witnessed his kindness and humility. Even though he was the one treated unfairly, he had made the experience feel better for everyone around him. As he stood up and reached for his backpack, the elderly man who had spoken to him earlier said again, "You're a good man. Thank you for showing patience today." Keanu smiled and gave a small nod. He didn't say much, but his actions spoke louder than words. As he moved slowly down the aisle toward the exit, a few passengers patted him on the shoulder or offered kind words. The young child waved at him again, and Keanu smiled warmly in Returned. Outside the plane, while waiting for bags, the same young flight attendant approached him one last time. "I just want to say, you've taught me something today," she said quietly. "Thank you for being so understanding." Keanu nodded gently and replied, "Thank you for your kindness." Without making a scene, without raising his voice, Keanu had touched the hearts of many people on that flight. They would remember this simple journey not because of delays or service, but because of the quiet, calm way one person had shown respect and kindness, even when the situation didn't go his way. After leaving the plane, Keanu walked quietly through the busy airport. He kept his head down, carrying only his small backpack. His flight had not gone as planned, but he didn't seem upset. He moved through the crowd with a calm expression, nodding politely when people recognized him. Some passengers from his flight whispered to each other as they watched him walk by. They had seen his patience and kindness and admired how he handled himself. Outside near the baggage claim, a few people approached him carefully. A woman who had sat near him on the plane said softly, "You really inspired me today. Thank you for being so kind even when they treated you unfairly." Keanu smiled warmly and replied, "Thank you for saying that. I just tried to keep peace." His answer was simple but sincere. Not far away, an airport worker was scrolling on her phone. She had noticed what happened on the flight too. She quickly typed a post on social media, describing how Keanu was treated and how graceful he had been. She ended her post by writing, "This is what real kindness looks like." She didn't expect much to happen, but within minutes, the post began to spread online. By the time Keanu reached the parking area, thousands of people had already shared the story. Comments poured in from all over. People praised Keanu's patience, his respect for the airline staff, and his humility despite the unfair treatment. Many felt touched by his calm behavior and the way he stayed kind, even when things didn't go right. But something more unexpected began to happen. A journalist picked up the story and posted about it on a popular news site. The headline was simple: "Keanu quietly moved to economy class, shows grace despite airline mistake." The story quickly spread, catching the attention of even bigger news outlets. The airline's name was mentioned again and again, and readers around the world began talking about it. At first, the airline did not respond. They thought it was just another travel story that would fade soon. But the online conversation kept growing. People began sharing their own bad experiences with the airline, saying they too had felt mistreated. Many wrote that they would think twice before booking with them again. Even passengers who had been on the same flight began posting pictures they secretly took during the journey. Photos of Keanu sitting calmly in economy class, reading his book, appeared everywhere. One photo showed him smiling at the little girl who waved at him. Another showed him quietly carrying his backpack back to his original seat. These simple images spoke volumes to the public. As the story grew bigger, airline officials finally noticed. Inside their offices, managers held emergency meetings. They reviewed what happened on the flight and tried to come up with a statement. Some felt it was not a big deal. They believed their staff had followed normal procedures. Others, however, warned that the public was seeing it differently. The airline's image was now at risk. Meanwhile, Keanu remained silent. He did not post anything about the flight on social media. He did not give interviews or comment publicly. He simply went about his day quietly, just as he always did. But the silence made the story feel even stronger. People respected that he wasn't trying to get attention. He hadn't asked for sympathy or fame. He had just accepted what happened with grace, and that spoke louder than any words. Days later, the airline finally posted an official apology on their social media accounts. The message said they were sorry for the mistake and that they valued all their passengers equally. But by then, the public was not easily satisfied. Comments poured in, many of them angry or disappointed. Travelers promised to avoid the airline. Bloggers and influencers joined the conversation, encouraging people to choose other airlines instead. In just a few days, what had begun as a simple mistake on a plane had turned into a much bigger story. Reports came in that the airline's stock value had dropped. Analysts estimated that public trust in the company was damaged, and bookings had declined sharply. News reports suggested that the airline might lose hundreds of millions of dollars in the coming months. Keanu himself stayed out of the headlines. He did not blame anyone. He did not tell his side of the story. But his quiet grace had sparked a conversation around the world, not just about airline service, but about the power of patience and respect. People who had never met him felt inspired. Many began thinking about how kindness could still make a difference, even in frustrating moments. The news about the airline spread quickly. It seemed like almost everyone was talking about how Keanu had been moved out of first class and how calmly he had handled the situation. Every day, more people shared their thoughts online, praising his kindness and patience. People admired how he didn't try to use his fame for special treatment and how he stayed quiet, even when he was treated unfairly. Many travelers shared their own bad experiences with the same airline. Stories of lost luggage, delayed flights, and poor service appeared all over social media. These stories made people feel connected to what had happened with Keanu. They felt like his experience showed a bigger problem, that the airline didn't seem to value its passengers. Some of Keanu's fans also shared personal stories about meeting him in real life. One person posted about how Keanu had once helped a stranger carry heavy bags at an airport. Another person wrote about how he gave up his seat on a subway for an elderly woman. These stories added to the picture of who Keanu was, not just a famous actor but a genuinely kind and humble person. As the public discussion grew louder, the airline began to feel the pressure. Their customer service centers were flooded with emails and phone calls. People were canceling their bookings and demanding refunds. Some travel agencies stopped promoting the airline altogether. Other airlines quietly noticed what was happening and began offering special discounts to attract passengers who were leaving the troubled company. Inside the airline's head office, executives held emergency meetings every day. They knew the damage to their reputation was serious, but they didn't seem to know how to fix it. Some of them suggested offering Keanu a free lifetime first-class pass. Others wanted to donate to charity in his name. But no one could agree on the right plan. Meanwhile, Keanu stayed silent. He did not post anything about the incident. He continued living his quiet life, away from the noise and attention. He didn't seem interested in using the situation to gain more fame or sympathy. This made the public respect him even more. His silence was powerful. It made people think about his character and how he had chosen kindness over anger. Reporters tried to reach Keanu for interviews, but he politely declined. He told his friends that he didn't want to create more trouble for anyone. He just wanted things to calm down. But the public didn't forget. For many people, this story was no longer just about a seat on a plane. It had become a symbol, a reminder that kindness matters and that companies should treat every customer with respect, no matter who they are. As days passed, the airline's stock price continued to fall. Investors became nervous. Travel bloggers and influencers encouraged their followers to avoid the airline and book with more passenger-friendly companies instead. The airline tried to run advertisements showing happy travelers and comfortable flights, but the ads felt empty. People kept commenting about Keanu's experience, reminding everyone that the airline had failed to show simple respect. What made the story even more powerful was that Keanu never asked for any of this attention. He never complained, never blamed, never shouted. His behavior spoke for itself. People admired his calm attitude and patience, and they shared the story as an example of how one person's quiet grace could make a difference. At airports around the world, travelers began talking about the incident while waiting for their flights. In coffee shops, people discussed how rare it was to see a famous person behave so humbly. Even airline staff from other companies quietly shared the story among themselves, saying they wished their own bosses would learn something from Keanu's patience and respect. In the end, this part of the story wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about the ripple effect of one small moment. A man treated unfairly, who chose kindness instead of anger, had started a global conversation. People everywhere felt inspired to think about how they treat others, and how companies should treat the people who trust them. Even though Keanu remained quiet and continued living his simple life, he had left a deep impression on thousands of people around the world. His actions reminded everyone that respect, patience, and kindness can still shine, even in the most ordinary places, like an airplane cabin at 35,000 feet. The story about Keanu's quiet dignity continued to grow. Even though many days had passed since that flight, people kept talking about it. News programs ran features about his calm response and shared how the airline was now struggling. Social media was full of comments praising him and criticizing the airline. It was clear that the public had not moved on. They felt connected to the message behind this incident. At airports, travelers chatted about it while waiting in long security lines. Many were now paying attention to how airline staff treated them. Some flight attendants from other airlines even felt inspired. A few of them shared online that they were trying harder to show kindness and respect to every passenger they served. What made this story special was that it was not only about Keanu being treated unfairly, it was about how he reacted. He could have spoken out, posted online, or demanded an apology in public, but he chose silence. He let his actions speak for themselves. This made people feel that he truly believed in kindness, not just when it was easy, but also when it was hard. Back at the airline's headquarters, things were getting worse. Their leadership was panicking. Bookings had dropped dramatically. Many travelers who had been loyal to them for years were now choosing other airlines. Even corporate clients, who usually booked large numbers of seats for business travel, were starting to leave. The airline's senior executives held meeting after meeting, trying to come up with ways to repair their image. Some of them suggested that they offer a public apology directly to Keanu and invite him to work with them on improving customer service. Others argued that they should simply wait until people forgot. But the public was not forgetting, even travel. Influencers, who were often paid to promote the airline, refused to post positive reviews. Many of them joined the growing conversation about how important it was for companies to treat every passenger with respect, whether they were famous or not. What made things harder for the airline was that every time they tried to speak about the situation, their words sounded hollow. Their social media posts were filled with comments from people reminding them of the mistake. Travelers posted screenshots of their own past problems with the airline, adding fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, Keanu stayed silent. He continued with his daily life, attending small film projects and helping others in quiet ways, just as he had always done. He didn't try to explain what had happened or give interviews. This silence made him even more respected. It showed that he hadn't needed the spotlight to act kindly. In one small but powerful example, a group of passengers who had been on the same flight decided to write an open letter. In this letter, they praised Keanu's calmness and patience, and said that they felt inspired by his behavior. They also shared how disappointed they were in the airline for how it had treated him. This letter was shared thousands of times online. It caught the attention of journalists and other travelers, adding more pressure on the airline's leadership. The passengers' words were simple but strong. "We were witnesses to grace and humility that day, and we hope this experience teaches the airline that every customer deserves respect." The airline's investors became nervous as the company's value dropped further. Some even began to sell their shares, fearing that the company's reputation might not recover easily. Analysts on business channels discussed how the airlines' troubles were not just about one mistake, but about a culture that didn't value its customers properly. Even competing airlines quietly took advantage of the situation. They offered discounts and special promotions, using words like respect and kindness in their advertising. Travelers noticed and rewarded these companies with their bookings. All of this happened without a single angry word from Keanu himself. He didn't demand anything. He didn't threaten a lawsuit or call for boycotts. His quiet dignity had done all the talking. People who followed the story admired how one person's grace and patience had sparked such a large conversation. Even children, when hearing about it from their parents, learned a lesson about how to behave when things didn't go their way. Keanu's story reminded everyone that kindness doesn't mean weakness. Patience doesn't mean you have to accept bad treatment forever, but it means responding with calm strength. His example was teaching people that respect and humility can have power, sometimes more power than anger or complaints. The story was far from over, but already the impact was clear. Without raising his voice or asking for attention, Keanu had made the world pause and think about how people treat each other, even in simple, everyday situations like sitting on a plane. The days continued to pass, but the airline's troubles did not fade away. The story of Keanu's quiet kindness stayed alive in people's hearts and minds. It kept appearing on television, in newspapers, and all over social media. Everywhere, people talked about how the airline's poor handling of the situation revealed something bigger, a lack of care for the everyday traveler. Even though Keanu had not said a word about it, many travelers felt like he was speaking for them through his actions. They thought about times when they had felt ignored or treated unfairly while traveling. His patience reminded them that it was possible to respond to bad treatment without shouting or anger, but also that respect must go both ways. At airports around the world, passengers were more alert. They watched carefully how airline staff spoke to them. Many travelers even shared that they now chose different airlines simply because of this one story. People wanted to feel valued, not just as ticket numbers, but as human beings. Inside the airline's boardrooms, frustration was growing. Their leaders were confused. Why did this simple incident, a seating mistake, lead to such a crisis? They reviewed their training programs, advertising campaigns, and policies. But what they didn't understand was that this wasn't just about a seat. It was about trust and dignity. The public saw how quickly the airline took something away from a kind and humble man, without even showing him proper respect. In their panic, the airline decided to reach out to Keanu directly. They sent a polite letter, offering him a lifetime first-class pass, hoping this gesture would help repair their image. They also asked if he would appear in an ad campaign about kindness in travel. They believed that if he accepted, it would help them win back the public's trust. But Keanu, true to his quiet nature, declined politely. He did not want to turn the incident into a promotion. He felt that the best way forward was to let people draw their own lessons from what had happened, without turning it into a business opportunity. His response was simple and respectful, and again, it made the public admire him even more. Travelers everywhere shared his polite refusal online. It became another reason why they respected him. He wasn't looking for free flights or fame. He simply wanted to live quietly and kindly, the same way he always had. As this happened, a group of former airline staff spoke out. They shared stories about how the company often cared more about profits than people. Their stories added more fuel to the public's frustration. The company's name was now tied to a lack of care and respect, and it felt like no amount of advertising could fix it. Meanwhile, Keanu continued with his life. He visited a few small charities quietly, helping people in need, just as he always did. He avoided public attention and stayed humble. For him, this whole situation was not about revenge or anger. It was just a moment that passed, and he had moved on. But the world had not forgotten. At airports, taxi stands, cafes, and homes. People told the story again and again. Parents told their children how Keanu had handled the moment with grace and patience. Teachers used it as an example in classrooms about how to stay calm under pressure. Even some company managers discussed it during meetings, reminding their teams to treat every customer with respect and dignity. The airline, however, could not escape the damage. Their brand had been deeply hurt. Every time they tried to speak about it, their words seemed empty. No clever slogans or special offers could cover what the public had seen with their own eyes: a passenger treated carelessly, and a company that failed to show respect. While the airline struggled to recover, other companies learned from the situation. They began improving their own customer service. Some even used the phrase, the Keanu way, when talking about patience and kindness. His quiet example had become more powerful than any official campaign. What made this even more remarkable was that Keanu had never planned any of this. He had simply been himself, kind, patient, and respectful. He hadn't needed loud words or dramatic gestures. His calm behavior was enough to inspire millions. As the airline's bookings continued to fall, business experts estimated they would lose nearly $500 million because of this one incident. It was a huge price to pay, but it also served as a lesson to other companies. Never underestimate the impact of simple kindness, and never forget that every customer, no matter who they are, deserves to be treated with respect. Keanu, far from the headlines and cameras, simply kept living his quiet life, unaware that his calm and humble actions had started a wave of change across the world. While the airline continued to struggle, Keanu quietly carried on with his life, far from the noise and attention. He didn't speak about the flight, didn't comment on the viral stories, and didn't blame anyone. His silence spoke louder than words. People around the world admired this even more, because they saw that his kindness was not for show. It was simply who he was. The company's reputation, however, kept sinking. Customers left in large numbers. Even longtime loyal travelers chose other airlines now. Travel writers and influencers kept the story alive, reminding people that this was not about one seat, but about respect and human dignity. In meeting rooms, the airline's leadership debated what to do next. They tried changing their advertising campaigns and sent out emails promising a new culture of care. But for many travelers, it felt too late. They had already lost trust. People had seen what really mattered to the airline, not people, but policies. Even as the company struggled, other businesses were paying close attention. Managers in hotels, restaurants, and other airlines discussed how one quiet passenger had brought down a giant company, not through anger or loud protests, but through patience and grace. The phrase "travel the Keanu way" became popular. Online, symbolizing respect, humility, and kindness, Keanu himself remained unaware of how widely his actions were being discussed. He kept helping others quietly. One day, he visited a children's hospital, spending hours reading books to young patients, making them smile. Another time, he was spotted in a small coffee shop, sitting alone, enjoying a simple cup of tea. People who recognized him respected his space and often whispered to each other, "That's the man who stayed calm when they treated him unfairly." Parents around the world share his story with their children, teaching them an important lesson. When life feels unfair, it's still possible to be kind. Teachers used his example in classrooms, talking about respect, patience, and the power of quiet strength. His behavior had touched hearts, and his influence kept spreading in ways even he could not imagine. Eventually, some business magazines wrote detailed reports about how much money the airline had lost because of this one incident. Experts estimated that the company's losses had crossed $500 million. Investors had pulled out, bookings had dropped, and their brand had become weak in the eyes of the public. All this had happened simply because one kind man was treated without care, and because millions of people around the world had seen that moment and felt it was wrong. Yet, Keanu never once called for boycotts. He never told people to avoid the airline. He never criticized anyone publicly. This made people respect him even more. His quiet dignity had shown that sometimes you don't have to shout to make a difference. Sometimes just staying patient, calm, and kind is enough. Even airline staff in other companies felt inspired. A flight attendant from a different airline wrote online, "We all should learn from this. Every passenger deserves respect, no matter who they are or what seat they're in." While the airline struggled, the world kept learning from this simple story. Companies looked at their customer service policies again. Managers trained their staff to treat every guest with more care. Travelers became more aware of how they were treated and started expecting kindness as a basic part of service. All this happened because of one man's gentle actions on a plane. He never asked for attention. He never tried to make himself the center of the story. But people noticed anyway, not because he made noise, but because he didn't. His patience became a quiet symbol of what true respect looks like. As time passed, the airline finally admitted that they had learned a hard lesson. In a statement, months later, they promised to improve not just their service, but their entire company culture. Some wondered whether it was too late, but at least they were finally admitting their mistake. For Keanu, though none of this seemed to matter much, he continued walking through life as he always did, calm, kind, and humble. He had never expected to cause such a reaction. He had simply stayed true to himself in a difficult moment. In the end, his story became more than just a tale about an airline mistake. It became a reminder that one quiet act of patience can inspire millions. It taught people everywhere that kindness and humility are never wasted, and that even in ordinary places, like the cabin of an airplane, the way we treat each other matters deeply. Without making demands, without asking for revenge, and without raising his voice, Keanu had changed the conversation around the world simply by being himself.